Morning, everyone. We have a fun panel with two distinguished experts. So without further ado, I'll bring them out. Mark Thiele, who has been in the cloud business since before cloud was even water droplets that had evaporated from the oceans. And Kireeti Kompella from Juniper, who's also a luminary across networking and cloud. So we're going to have some interesting dialogue on what's going on in the industry. And then we're going to open it up to the floor for questions. It's a little bit hard to see here, so kind of wave your arms like a crazy person if you have any questions, because the lights are blinding. So why don't you each introduce yourselves and also what your company does in a way that anyone can understand, including me. Mark, start with you.
So Mark Thiele, I'm a Chief Strategy Officer for Apcera. Apcera is in the IT euphemisms, a platform company, a software platform company. We help customers of all kinds, pretty much every industry and every size, use and adopt cloud more effectively, using the most modern technologies available for efficient use and deployment of modern and legacy applications into the cloud, allowing them to use cloud effectively the way you would expect to be able to use servers in your data center. Doesn't matter which cloud you're using the cloud that makes the most sense for you. You're using it the most efficient way possible with the kind of enterprise management controls that allow you to feel comfortable with those applications, regardless of whether it's running on a Google Cloud or an Amazon Cloud, an Azure Cloud, or an OpenStack cloud in your own data center.
Okay, Kireeti.
Kireeti Kompella, Chief Technology Officer for our engineering group called JDI, so occasionally referred to as Jedi Master. Before that, I was CTO at Contrail, so I know a little bit about the cloud. And Juniper, hopefully you know what they do, but the way I'm going to put it is we make PNFs, physical network functions, and VNFs. And we have aggregated or integrated systems, and we have disaggregated systems. So whatever you want, come to us, we'll give you some.
Okay, so Mark, let me start with you with your kind of explanation of what you do. You're sort of doing consulting, onboarding, advising, tooling, monitoring for people that want to move to the cloud. So what are you seeing? What's shifting in terms of trends, or as some might say, the changing realities of the cloud? What's new and different?
Yeah, as industry pundits, and it doesn't matter which part of the industry you're from, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, whether you're Amazon or Google or HP, we have a fairly bad habit of lumping the opportunity or the strategy associated with cloud into a simple bucket. And it's not a simple bucket. What we're finding with our customers is that they want to be able to leverage, they are finally looking at cloud from an educated perspective of saying, cloud is a platform for deployment of applications, one of several. The type of application they're deploying, for the reason they're deploying it, requires specific types of capability. Whether that's available in one cloud or available in all of the clouds helps determine their choices and or their opportunity for the deployment of that application, whether it's price, whether it's latency, whether it's performance, whether it's security, compliance, or all of the above. And so really what our customers are hoping to do is most IT budgets are relatively flat these days, and the vast majority of IT organizations spend from a people and a resource standpoint is on keeping the lights on. How do they keep moving forward the pile of crap that they've all built up? And I'm part of that, building piles of crap. I did it for 25 years. Keeping that pile moving forward takes almost all of their energy and resource. And because of that, they have very little time and opportunity to do anything that might be considered innovative from an IT perspective. So what they're using tools like ours for is to help them free up resource in that keep the lights on framework, which is somewhere between 75 and 85% of their overall effort and budget, and take and move applications, right-size applications, and move them to places where they get the most value, either by consolidating data centers, moving them to a cloud provider, putting them in cloud, but because of the formatting we help them do as they move, they're using 25% of what they were using before in their previous designs. But in effect, they're creating more agility and more opportunity to innovate while reducing the boat anchor of legacy IT that they've been trying to carry forward, freeing them up effectively to absorb new technologies and to create new opportunity for their business from the perspective of IT.
So, Kireeti, you support service providers, I assume, largely in your business.
Yes.
So, presumably a lot of the companies that may or may not be in this room. What are you seeing as far as service providers? And, if you go back 10 years ago, it was kind of, there's this little bookseller that thinks they can, do
Yes.
our stuff, not realizing that, selling books by mail is very different than running a large, enterprise class, high availability, mission critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then phase 2 was, oh, wow, there really is something to this, but that's no problem. We can compete effectively. And then lately, all the headlines are, service provider, network service provider X is selling its data center assets and/or exiting the business. So, is there a service provider cloud business that is more than buying cloud stuff to implement NFV, or what is the relevance of cloud to service providers today?
Well, they really want to get into the business. They don't always know how to do it. They come with a background of, I know how to build a network. And that's important because you got to get from the customer to the cloud. But they don't always know what to do in the cloud. They're not typically, software people. And there's a lot of software there. But they do want to get into that market. And one of the things that they know well is how to do things that scale. BGP, the internet, is just very large scale. But the other side of it is, how do I maintain those systems? How do I offer the kind of APIs that people want to do? Where Amazon has been really successful is this virtual private cloud and the APIs that they brought to it, so people can use that really well. Then you tell a service provider, you should do the same thing, and they say, oh, I don't know what an API is. I mean, it sounds good.
Well, that seems like a little bit of a hindrance if you're going to enter the business.
Yes. But they do have a lot of the infrastructure that's needed. And so now you see the big cloud providers saying, we're going to lay infrastructure as well. They're getting into laying subsea cables and so on. But they're just sort of tactical pieces of that, where yesterday there was this discussion about how do you get the last mile and how do you get customers onboarded. The other thing that's really not exploited enough by the service providers is they have a long history. Usually they have a long history with subscribers, mobile or wireline, and they don't know how to use that well. They don't know how to take somebody's billing history and say, okay, I know what kind of person this is. I know if they're trustworthy. Whereas the people who are over the top only know what you tell them, but over time they learn a lot more.
But isn't that, in a way, that's a little bit of an unfair hit, because it seems like network service providers are a little bit more constrained in terms of their use of customer proprietary and personally identifiable information, whereas some other players, who will remain nameless, the over-the-top players, seem to be a little bit less, play fast and loose. So to me, the thing that I just don't get is cloud is inherently a network-centric function.
Yes.
And so if anyone should have an edge, it's someone that already has been running a network for 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, right. 120 years. And yet, all those investments seem to have been dismal failures, to call it, let's call it what it is. So does fog open up a new era potentially, where maybe the first wave was a missed opportunity, but fog and IoT are new? Thoughts?
Well, I certainly believe there's a possibility. I mean, I think there are a couple of things about network service providers that put them at a disadvantage from the very beginning in building cloud. And this doesn't mean that they couldn't or shouldn't, but it puts them at at a psychological, if not a monetary or business strategy disadvantage. And the two things that come to mind are that historically, when putting out a new system in any network, it's a year of investment in proof of concept and then a year of deployment to sit there for as long as possible to return revenue. Amazon and Google and Microsoft do release to production of new features on a daily basis. Their clouds are, in many cases, 100% different over the course of a year or 18 months from a service capability standpoint. So that speed of change and speed of ability to address changing customer demand or changing customer opportunity, or even developing opportunity before the customer recognizes it's an opportunity, is a key characteristic of delivering very large scale, very competitive cloud infrastructure. Another disadvantage, even though it's also an advantage, is that you own the network and you want to make money off the network. And while making money off the network is a byproduct for companies like Equinix in making cross connects, et cetera, where the money really comes from is in offering the services that end up leveraging the network. And for the cloud providers, I'm going to use an example, a real world example, but I'll change the names to protect the innocent and the guilty. I looked at actually buying a relatively large network service provider that also had some landing stations about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago.
And which one was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost managed to get it through. It wasn't up to me to buy it, but I was making the recommendation and suggestions. And I was going to do something that probably would have made every senior executive at the company turn over in their grave, in the company that I was planning to buy. I was effectively going to turn their entire undersea network across a big portion of Asia into free, toll-free highways and build service offering capabilities at their landing stations across Asia. Because to me, access to a capability, by simplifying that access, you drive greater demand. And there's no better example of that. If anybody in this room hasn't read or studied Jevons paradox before, I highly recommend spending 5 minutes going to Wikipedia and reading about Jevons paradox, Jevons. The scientists that did a study on the efficient or the change in use and scale of use of coal based on its availability and price going down. And that applies directly to technology. So the more you can ease the on-ramp to the use of technology, the greater you accelerate the use of other services that potentially provide you better profit opportunity.
Kireeti, what do you think?
So I think that service providers do have an advantage in the network. They also have talk about fog, wherever fog is, wherever the edge is. People don't know where the edge is in edge computing. But by having central offices, service providers have a nice real estate advantage. They have places that are close to the customer. And if they turn them into mini data centers, and if they turn these into places where they can not only serve out content, but do low latency, high scale stuff.
So I agree, but this is the theoretical strategic advantage versus the practical reality, right? So you guys you're talking practical reality, like lack of IT skills. You're talking architectural strategic advantage. So maybe to blend the two, Kireeti, you work with service providers all around the world, I'm sure. So you can name names, or the names can be disguised to protect the guilty, as you wish. But who's doing something brilliant, either by name or by general initiative that obviously is not under NDA, and who has just taken in your mind a completely wrong tack to leveraging technology or DevOps or other capabilities?
So I'll give you one name, which is Orange. And what Orange has said is, when you build a cloud, when a customer comes to the cloud, they want these set of VMs that are their own. And so, what is that set of VMs? Is that VMs on a VLAN? And they said, no, it's VMs in a VPN. You're my customer. You have a VPN service from me. I'm going to extend that into the cloud, into the data center. I'll give you extensions to your VPN into servers, into VMs. And I think that was very, very smart. It's rather than saying I'm going to build this completely different thing, I'm going to make cloud an extension of an offering that I already have. And I think that's really good. From the more theoretical side, I think AT&T is looking at the problem that Mark referred to. I need to be more agile. And they recognize the problem. I'm not sure that they've completely solved it yet, but they recognize the problem and they're trying to have a complete change of DNA, which is not easy. But I mean, recognizing the problem is the first step.
That's the
and
first
I think
step,
that's a huge,
sure.
huge thing.
So it seems as though, some of the things that you guys have hit on is, it's not the technology, it's the development process and, whether you're doing the kind of, two pizza box team development and then the frequent continuous delivery with automated, production testing tools. And the DNA issue is partly, for 911 service, it can't be like, our 911 service is in beta, for 5 years and, please check back for updates.
E911.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
So it's partly an issue of the core business has always had to be so robust that you can't hold it against them. So, but what I'm hearing you saying is it's a skills, organization, culture issue, because the APIs are public. It's not like it's a trade secret that nobody knows what the APIs that AWS has, right? So what do you think? What are your recommendations to the service providers in the audience? And then we'll open it up for questions.
Well, other than what Kireeti and I have already mentioned about some of the opportunities and the risks, I tend to come at problems, even some of the largest problems, from the fundamental basics. In many cases, you could call it from the human equation. And this may be a struggle to call it the human equation, but a very large equipment provider recently attempted to force the opportunity associated with cloud onto the world by forcing a hardware sale to be part of that solution. The goal of the cloud sale was not to offer services that drove revenue on the hardware that was being provided. The goal of the cloud sale for this provider, this equipment provider, was to sell more hardware and to protect the hardware that they were making. And I realize that may seem like semantics, but it's not. Nobody at Google, nobody at Microsoft, nobody at Amazon, now even no one at IBM, for the most part, outside of the mainframe business, care about the hardware. All they care about is, can they make more services on the hardware to make that hardware more valuable? They have no preconceived notion about what that hardware will be. They don't care if it's different the next day. If they can make it work and they can make more money off of it, that's what they care about. So fundamentally, when you look at building a cloud business, you have to look at it independent of any other aspect of the business, but utilize those parts of your business that you already own to help accelerate the adoption and use of that new infrastructure. But whether you're HP and you're trying to sell hardware and then you also want to sell services on top of it, nobody wants to buy your hardware. Or you're IBM and you want to sell DR strategy, but then you come in and crowd the IT organization because you also want to sell them storage and hardware or data center capacity. You can't come at it from that angle. You have to come at it from the point that you're selling services. You're selling cloud-enabled capacity, effectively new platforms for applications. And you have to come from that angle first.
Or maybe at least that we have a portfolio and whatever you want and best meets your needs, we're happy to sell you and collect money one way or another, but do what you want rather than what we want.
Right.
Okay, so speaking of doing what you want rather than what we want, are there any questions out there? You got rare opportunity before these guys fly out later. Not even one question. All right, well, I'll ask a question.
So let me jump in with, there's one here.
Sorry.
A mic's coming towards you.
Hi, Jeff Snyder with Cloud Constellation. The question I had for you is security. In the cloud, the security, data is treated as data. And do you see segregation in the type of data that you're trying to enable in the cloud and the type of applications you have in the cloud? And what are your strategies to do that?
Are you, anyone in particular, or?
Someone on
Anyone on the
stage.
panel.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll start if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's a great question. It's a big question. Trying to figure out the best place to start. So I'll take several different angles and try to hit them independently. Data sovereignty is obviously a major issue in today's market, only becoming more so. Data sovereignty means that you can deliver applications, you can deliver a capability to a region, a nation, a continent, but you've got to be able to protect where that data ends up based on national or state law. How you protect data translates to a combination of security, a combination of hierarchy, and compliance as well. So how do you manage all of those factors for a customer? I don't actually believe, at least right now, that that's a capability that most of the cloud providers would attempt to sell. What I would say is they would attempt to sell you a framework that allows you to deploy capabilities against their technology to allow you to manage to those requirements for your business. Whether that requirement is compliance, whether that's security, or whether it's location of where the data is stored. And that also applies to how you evaluate the data that you're collecting, maintaining, and storing to determine how long you keep it and where it should be kept and how it should be secured.
Kireeti, do you want to jump in too?
Yeah, I think security is a very important question, and it's one of the things that makes people nervous about putting their stuff in the cloud. So this is important to address and address effectively. I think you need to do security at the application layer. You really need to make sure that the application itself is doing it. But you have this belt and suspenders approach where you say, I'm going to do security at the application layer, I'm going to do security on the server, I'm going to do security in the network. And I'm going to use that because the thing that always trips you up in security is there's a human that made a mistake. It's not always the case, but that's very often the case. So the more layers of security you have, the better off you are. But I also want to take this discussion in a different direction. I have a love-hate relationship with SDN. So I repurposed this acronym to be self-driving networks. And what I want to do there is have the network run itself. And when people say, what part of the network, what aspect? And in having that discussion, I've gone to self-defending networks. And if you build a network, you build a cloud, you build an infrastructure, the people that are going to attack you are not going to be humans, it'll be bots. There'll be a botnet. And if you say, but I've got these humans that are guarding the gate, you're dead. So you need the good bots fighting the bad bots. And so that's where I think you need to go for security is you need something that's going to detect, look at these patterns, say, oh, there's something going on, analyze it, say how to stop it. And it's got to be done fast because every second counts.
So speaking of bots and security, when you think of the cloud, the simplistic view is somebody else's computers with a rental model, but it misses the nuances, right? Like the fact that I'm not sure exactly the extent to which economies of scale are critically important in differential pricing, but there is the power of scale, and specifically what comes to mind is the Dyn botnet attack, which was a 1.2 terabit per second estimated bandwidth, which eclipsed the prior year's record, which was less than half as much. So with that, you have to ask yourself, where is if not my data, where is my service going to be more available or secure? And the answer is probably with a cloud provider for the simple fact that they're able to withstand that, got the security teams in place, back to the skills issue to be able to handle it. So, okay, do we have one more question? Sort of yell out because it's very hard to see from here. Great.
Thanks, Tim Moran, Oppenheimer. Mark, you have an interesting perspective. You're on the infrastructure side for a long time now, a little bit more on the app side. Just two high-level questions. Where are we in the need for data center capacity and network capacity out there in this whole process to migrate to the cloud? And secondly, Joe was at a thesis of multi-clouds and hybrid clouds. It sounds like you're a believer in that thesis, and maybe you're even seeing that accelerating. Just at a high level, maybe what new clouds out there do you see that are interesting, exciting, or competing with the top 2 or 3 big guys?
Yeah, from a data center and network capacity standpoint, I think the last time we're ever going to see extra capacity on the network that people would have thought, what are we ever going to do with all this stuff, is going to be the first 5 years of the 2000s. That's the last time we're ever going to see massive extra capacity on the network that people don't know how to use. You guys all know these trends, but I'm going to say them anyway. There's the fact that we have more and more Netflix-oriented type businesses delivering services, and that's on the downstream. We all understand that. We all deliver to that. What we don't all understand effectively or deliver for is the upstream side, and the fact that almost every IT organization, not just the Netflix, every service provider is going to have to think about the upstream now just as much as they do the downstream. That's going to have a massive impact on network growth. The other trends in general that will drive network use and growth are things that we've all heard the acronyms for, the buzzwords for, things like IoT and VR, virtual reality, for anybody who's not paying attention to that. VR, actually, it's funny, we don't often mention VR. I actually think VR is going to be a much bigger driver for network adoption and use than most people realize. AI and ML, which basically are the one and the same, they work together, and more business opportunity being created by each one of those areas of opportunity. So I think that's going to drive network bandwidth, certainly. I don't think there's going to be much of a slowdown in that. But again, we can't think of cost per gigabyte on the network when it goes down. We can't think of that as a negative. If that were the case, then we would have stopped selling CPUs 25 years ago, because now a CPU is 10,000 times better than it was 10 years ago, and yet from a cost comparison standpoint, it's 1/100th the cost from the compute capability standpoint.
So Kireeti, anything to add?
So I want to bring this back to software. 5 years ago, the mantra was software is eating the world, and I think this was Mark Andreessen who said this.
Yeah.
But last year, the mantra was machine learning is eating software. And so what you're going to see in data centers is a move from I've got lots and lots and lots of Intel processors to I've got lots and lots and lots of GPUs that are going to help me do machine learning. And machine learning is going to eat software.
Or lots of Nirvana chips.
Right. And so you're going to say, yeah, I have lots of CPUs, but maybe So Amazon used to sell, small, medium, large CPUs, or rent, to use Joe's term. But now they're renting you GPUs. They're a lot more expensive, and you'll find that they're not enough. And so Amazon is just going to spin that up. And so I think it's more than do we have enough data center capacity, but what kind of data center capacity do we have?
Yeah.
So just to respond because Tim was talking about, I coined this term, your SDN term, the hybrid multi-cloud fog as being kind of the directional architecture, and it sounds like something crazy, but it actually has a lot of meaning that captures what's going on in the cloud, namely the rise of hybrids, so the notion that private, virtual private, colo, and public clouds all have a role, and that role may vary based on security, elasticity requirements, et cetera. Secondly, that the cloud, which has traditionally been deployed through hyperscale, more centralized, consolidated data centers, is really moving into droplets of fog that are much more dispersed. And that could be, as you were saying, telcos could deploy it in switching centers or regen huts or slick boxes or wherever they want, as long as you get some of the stat muxing benefits of the pooled capacity. So that hybrid multi-cloud fog is a hybrid of private and public, cloud and fog, or centralized and edge. And the multi-cloud aspect is not just using multiple clouds, which everyone today uses multiple clouds. They're using, Gmail or Google Docs or Azure or Salesforce. But where it really becomes a true multi-cloud in my mind is where you can actually tie these things together to create some integrated function, which could be, DR, like run in Amazon but back up in Google, or something across a workflow. So that is the future, and the evolution, I think, was captured by Kireeti. I'm going to build on his thing. We've gone from somewhat dumb networks to software-defined networks to self-driving networks, and that captures the evolution, I think, from no functionality to the rise of software to the rise of AI, deep learning, and so forth. And with that, we're going to deep learn our way right off stage exactly with 9 seconds to go or so. Thank you. Thank you.